Okay, so now what do we want to get to? How about your trips to Europe?
Oh,
okay,
my goodness.
so Mr. Not having been here for 18 months,
Right.
You've had a life, I'm sure.
Well, I have got a life in ministry and a short life home. I never seek to travel. I'm called by God's people to come and do teaching. Mm-hmm. So when they are sincere about that, I respond. And so in September, October of last year, I was given the great privilege of accompanying Dr. Arnold Fruchtenbaum on one of his teaching trips to Europe and co-teaching at various conferences and churches with him in Italy.
Wow.
And now he had been there the previous year, but I had never been there. But this past summer, the summer of 2019, we had two families of believers from Italy who came up to the Camp Shoshana Bible program where I teach. And they had invited us to come to Italy. They arranged a tour. They arranged a weekend conference. And we were unsure about the numbers, but the place was packed out. And these are Italian believers, born-again believers, who love the Lord and are a minority within a minority. You have to understand that Italy is, in essence, for all intents and purposes, a post-Christian country.
Yeah, most of Europe is.
And, you know, to them, Christendom has to do with their ancient history, not with who they are now. And so they tend to dismiss Christianity, and those few times during the year when they will acknowledge it is, you know, a wedding or a funeral. And then, of course, it's these big Roman Catholic cathedrals, of which they are very beautiful in Italy. So the quote-unquote Protestant church is extremely small. And then within the so-called Protestant church, you have an even smaller group of born-again believers, of evangelicals. And that was the group that invited us. And it was a wonderful 2 weeks of teaching every single day, sometimes morning and evening.
Wow.
We would teach twice. And for most of that, I was with Dr. Fruchtenbaum. We'd alternate, and we would have conferences where he would teach an hour. We would take a 15-minute break, and then I would teach. And the believers were eager. They all had their Bibles. They had pencil and paper, taking copious notes.
And all of that 2 weeks was in Italy?
Those 2 weeks were all entirely in Italy. The group that called us in and arranged it, there's a group of believers in Prato, Italy, which is just outside of Florence. Beautiful, beautiful area in the Tuscany area of northern Italy, indescribably beautiful. And we were there in a perfect season in September. So it was just, you know, it was just truly beautiful to be there. The atmosphere and the food, of course, is excellent. And the believers are very warm. Everyone hugs and kisses. And this is September.
That's also the Italian culture.
Yes, they hug and they kiss. And so it was just a wonderful time. And they were very warm. I got to sit in. They had in this congregation, they have a praise band. So I play guitar. And they say, hey, we heard you play guitar. And we looked through the songbook. We found a song I could play. And so I had no idea what they were singing, but I knew the tune. It was one of our modern contemporary tunes. So I knew the chords. And so I've got photos of me singing. Okay,
so you mentioned Camp Shoshana. That is one of my questions. Is Camp Shoshana on or off this year?
I found out literally about 12 hours ago that Camp Shoshana is being greatly condensed. We're only going to have Labor Day weekend because of the COVID situation.
Wow.
So it's actually, because it's in New York State,
yep.
And New York State is dragging its feet on opening up. And this is in far northern New York State.
Yeah.
The camp, this is the Ariel Ministries Bible Summer School. And it's in far northern New York State, just 30 minutes south of the border. But this year is going to be very difficult. But I haven't finished telling you about my Europe trip.
Okay.
So I just...
We'll get back to
I was
Camp
ready.
Shoshana.
That's what we'll do. So after Italy, I got on a plane by myself, and Arnold stayed behind in Europe. And I got on a plane and went to Germany. This is after Florence, Rome, and Genova. Those are the 3 cities plus the retreat that we did. We had, by the way, in Rome, we had a 2 nights packed house. We used an auditorium in Rome that seats around 140, 150 people. It was packed to the walls in Rome.
Wow.
With believers. Very, very encouraging. And even the believers there who sponsored it looked around and they were just very encouraged. Now, when you speak in a place like Italy, your message has to be half the length because you're speaking with a translator. Okay, everything has to be translated into Italian. And so they're talking like this, and they're using their hands. And whatever you say, it takes them like lots of time to say it because they add lots of words. It's a beautiful culture, but it's very expressive. And if you say something that takes 20 seconds, it takes about 30 seconds of translation.
Wow.
So you've got to be very succinct and to the point with your words. So Rome was amazing. Don't ever get on the public bus system in Rome unless you know exactly what you're doing. It's an adventure. But we loved Rome. We saw all the sights. Big Jewish community at one time in Rome. We took a tour of old Jewish Rome. There was a sizable Jewish community there.
You know, I imagine because Italy, like most of Europe, is a post-Christian country now, that it would have been very encouraging to those people who packed the house in Rome and everywhere you went, that it was encouraging them to see there are more believers than you think. God is beginning to trickle his spirit out. He is calling us.
That's right. Another thing that the believers were very encouraged about that just happened, obviously the whole COVID situation became very severe in Italy, of all places. I have a good friend by the name of Jason who is a chaplain on a ministry team. Leave it there. And he's a chaplain on a ministry team. And he and his wife actually had just finished a pastorate in New Jersey, and they were called by this chaplaincy ministry saying, if you can be free and get on a plane in 5 days, we need a couple, a husband and wife, to go to Italy for about 4 to 5 weeks to be chaplains in the field hospital that we are about to establish in the worst of the COVID areas in Italy. And so this team took a big cargo plane. They took off from North Carolina. They landed in a city called Cremona, Italy. And there they set up a field hospital in the parking lot of the Municipal hospital there in Cremona. They ministered to hundreds and hundreds of people. They brought a team of doctors. They came with their entire surgical gear. They set up in these inflatable tents surgical hospitals, and it was an entirely evangelical Christian operation from start to finish. All of the surgeons, all of the medical people, nurses, and my chaplain friend. And the Italian believers said that this got onto the national news, the network news in Italy, and it's the most exposure that evangelical believers have ever received in a positive way in the last generation, the last 30 or 40 years, because they could see that these people were selfless. These were surgeons, these were registered nurses who could have been making money back in the States. But when an evangelical ministry called and said, can you do this? They were on the plane. So, excellent. And that's still having its good effect to this day.
It's ripple effects.
So, the Lord does things even in the midst of difficult circumstances like this COVID business.
That's right.
And we have yet to hear of all of the things that God is accomplishing in the midst of this otherwise horrible situation.
Well, see, I hadn't heard anything about that
Yes.
that story that you just related,
Oh.
and I'm like, you know what? There's a devil trying to kill everybody, trying to bring despair, and God says, you know what? I need you guys to be my feet, my hands, my mouth, my arms. Go to them in their hour of need and show them my love.
And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. It's amazing to see. So Italy, yes, in many ways a post-Christian country, but you know what that does? It makes the Christian serious. Yeah. When I worshiped with this group of believers in Prato, Italy, just a wonderful, warm, infectious spirit. They were serious Bible people. Several of the men there who are elders, they take turns preaching. In other words, there's not just one pastor. There is a group of around 4 to 5 elders, all of which, all of these men are qualified to teach and to preach. And they all have secular jobs. These are all businessmen.
Well, see, that's good, because if they have secular jobs, then they will preach truth, because they're not worried about tickling the ears of their congregants so that they will get a paycheck.
That's right. Not at all. That's
I'm sorry,
the
I'm a
situation.
little obstinate about that one.
Yes, that's their situation. So I was very encouraged. So then get on a plane,